Podcast time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sunday night. Tonight is the Gentleman and the Jerk. I am Chris. I can always screw this up. That is Marc over there. Marc's right there. Marc, how are you doing tonight?
Very, very well. How about you?
I am doing well. I'm doing pretty well. And, here we go. It did not take long at all for stuff to happen.
What did you do?
I have one of your articles up that is deciding to continue to autoplay. I'm going to close that article right down because we can't be having that nonsense happening. Anyway, I am having a good night tonight. I am already 2 bottles of wine in preparation for tonight's show because, you know, sometimes you just can't do something sober. Tonight is one of those nights where I think we both need to be in a comfortable space. As has been advertised, we are going to have a serious show tonight on the Gentleman of the Jerk. Marc, tell us about our serious show that we're doing.
Well, yes, this is first time I've been nervous for the show since the first show, so bear with me if you can. But tonight we're going to talk about my cousin Joey Levick. Joey was murdered in 1994. I'll just go out and say it. And I think we need to talk about him, talk about who he was to me, and you know, what his memory means now and what it needs to mean going forward. That's what I want to know or talk about. I don't even know what I'm saying. See, told you I was nervous.
Well, and I will say that I was ignorant to the story until you shared it with me, and I have been reading the articles pertaining to the events that took place and the aftermath, which is even more important, I believe, is the aftermath that occurred and the changes that have been made in some ways, and then in other ways the lack of change that's occurred. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. We'll get to that in a few minutes. In the meantime, though, let's catch each other up on where we're at with our lives. How's the last week been for you?
Well, I've been working a lot. You know, just the normal stuff this week. I decided to take out some of my stress of the podcast today with some baking. I made some bread, made some rolls, I cooked and cooked all day. I needed a focus. So other than that, just been normal stuff. Go to work, come back home, and do my routine. So
sure.
It sounds like you've gotten past the first few bumps in the road with your new office, I'm assuming?
Yeah, no, the new office is up and running. It's actually it's doing just fine. I as I've been complaining about for weeks now, I wish I had more people willing to work. The hardest problem that I'm having is finding employees. But with the ones that we have, less employees is less overhead, so that's not exactly the worst thing in the world. But there is demand for people to be there. There's just not the employees to fill that demand. But it's running smoothly. Everything's going great. My one of the things that I was most concerned about was this artificial intelligence that I purchased in order to help me with booking because I can't answer the phone all the time, especially for 2 locations, and the cost of a receptionist is exorbitant. So the AI is working fantastic, so I can't complain about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's everything's going well as far as the logistics of running a 2-location business in the COVID world. I really can't complain too much. I have been getting fat. I went through a phase of getting fat during COVID, and then I got myself under control and I lost some weight, and now I'm getting fat again. I'm not exactly sure why that's happening, but I really don't care because life's okay right now.
So, you don't look fat. I've seen videos of you where you look fat. You don't look that fat. So just saying.
Sure. And like I rode my bike 25 miles today. I'm not, and I ran 5 miles yesterday. It's like I'm not completely, like a tubby lard of shit or anything like that, but I'm not where I would like to be, especially at the end of the summer. Usually at the end of the summer, I'm at my peak physical shape, and I'm certainly not there right now.
Then you have 6 months to just go into the toilet, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get total lethargic and eat everything in sight. I went to a family dinner tonight though. My mother brought desserts. There was cookies, and I ate pastas and buffalo chicken wing dip and drank 2 bottles of wine and all that kind of nonsense. So
sounds like you had more fun than I did. I was I enjoy cooking. For me, it's relaxation, and more than the actual finished product. It's the it's how you get there, I guess.
Sure.
So, and I know you're a takeout guy.
Well, I like to cook too. Right when I'm working, when I'm in my full swing of work, which I'm in
No.
right now, I don't have time to shop. I don't have time to cook. I've got to depend on other people to feed me, unfortunately. But let's get off this silly nonsense. Let's
Yep.
get to the
Yep.
serious stuff. This is what we've been talking about doing for weeks now, and now we're here. Why don't you? I'm going to turn the camera over completely to you. Why don't you
Oh
give me
boy.
the breakdown of what happened and your side of the story?
Well, so I was pretty young when this happened. This was 26 years ago. So it's a long time. I mean, it's more than half my life. I was 14 when this went down. But I do remember that day. Um, June. It would have been. I would have found out on Friday, June 3rd, 2000. What is 1994? Jeez, that's a long time ago. Um, I remember knowing something was wrong when my mom was picking me up from an event we had at high school called the Big Event. It was the end of school bash. I had a girl with me at the time going. I was anticipating that my parents would be able to drive her home. And I get to the car, and my sister was sitting in the car, and open the slider on the minivan door, and boom, she just kind of just says it. And I didn't react at first. I think that's how a lot of people feel when they find out a family member has been murdered. Um, and that was the start of it. That was the start of 26 years of hell for my aunt and uncle. Um, Sentences that were reduced, and um, just innocence lost for a lot of people. Um, that's the beginning. Joey was only 21 years old when he died. He didn't even get to start life. He was just learning what life was about right then. And I think sometimes people talk about survivor's guilt, and there are times I do feel that. And I talked to my Uncle Joe, Joey's dad, and I hope I hope I'm a good person. I hope I've put myself into a position where I can represent our family. And in this case, I want to get this out there. All of this happened before the internet age, before people were going online, and stories were instantly transferred all over the world. I mean, you have 400 different articles with 400 different opinions on a subject today. If you go back and just look for Joey Levick or the names of the two people that murdered him, you're only going to find a handful of stories. If you're all interested in this, at the end, I did add a link to this discussion page from the LA Times. At the time, the LA Times produced a wonderful article. It was written by Barry Siegel about Joey, and it goes into a little bit more detail than I'm going to share here about what happened to him. And I do suggest you read it, because I think it's a powerful article, and it goes into a few other things that Chris and I wanted to talk about. There's two other aspects of this story, and I think Chris will probably want to get a little farther into this. One is, kind of the justice system kind of let his parents down. I wouldn't say kind of. The justice system let his parents down. And secondly, there were multiple people that knew Joey was actively dying in a ditch, and they did nothing about it. They didn't do a damn thing about it, and that's a shame. And as you can see, the article is on the screen right now, and I really hope you all get to read that. Chris, I mean, what did you think when you read that? I mean, what was your first reaction?
Well, it's astonishing. For me, it was the fact, like you said, the responsibility of people when something like this happens, what a stranger's responsibility is, and how that was not taken care of in the way that you would expect human beings to act. I have been in a situation a number of times in my life through random circumstances when I had to step in and play a part in helping somebody, either in a car. There was incidents with a car accident. As a bouncer, I've seen a couple of very, very brutal fights that took place outside of the bar in the neighborhood that the bar was in that I had to intervene in. And this kind of falls into that sphere of it was a beating that took place, and people were aware of what happened and the fact that he was laying there dying and didn't do anything about it. So as I learned about this story, the reality is that any murder is a tragedy, but the way that we treat our fellow humans, often without dignity and without mercy and without compassion, is the real tragedy that I see here. And then of course there's the legal ramifications, the lack of real justice, if you will, and then there's the legislation piece of it that took place later, where they tried to change the law, and its wheels were spun in a number of different ways. So what for you? I mean, obviously losing a cousin or a loved one in any way, any relation, is tough. But when you look back at this decades later, what is the biggest thing for you?
The biggest thing for me is looking at my aunt and uncle and just seeing their loss and how sorry I feel that they had to go through it even closer than I did. That's the biggest thing I take from it is, we can all live our lives and we can all move on, and 26 years is a long time, but you've got a couple that were effectively also handed, I mean, I hate to say it, handed a death sentence as well when this happened. They lost, my uncle lost they lost their only son, I can't, I'm close to it, but I can't imagine being that close to it.
Okay, so let's
just brutal.
Let's take a moment, because there's going to be people that are going to watch this, whether they're friends of ours or family members of yours or strangers that find us through YouTube. So let's back up and let's go through the whole scenario step by step. So first of all, he was murdered by two people. Who were these two people, and how did they know your cousin?
So let's start at the beginning. So Joey decided to go out for the night, just like he normally would, and at some point in that night, he met up with two people that are thought of as acquaintances, Jason Solar and Jason Twyman, at a club. They happened to be 20 years old at the time and were allowed into the club. So there's the first problem. They were allowed into the club and allowed to drink underage. So here's the first issue.
Now, did they know him? Were they friends of his? Did they know each other?
As far as I know, they weren't great friends or anything like that. They went to school together. They knew of each other. They were acquaintances. That's what I know. And
Okay.
that's what. So, but in long story short, three of them ended up in the car together. I believe it was Jason Solar's car. At some point along the line, something happened, and there's been multiple stories as to what happened. Something happened where they pulled off to the side of the road near the SeaTac airport in Burien, Washington, got out, and a fight ensued. During that fight, 2 against 1, Joey ended up trying to get away. He made it, I believe, about 50 feet away. He was tackled by one of them. He was thrown into a drainage ditch along with the other fella, who wasn't as badly hurt. And that's where he ended up. And he was stuck in that drainage ditch. He was so injured that he wasn't able to get out of that drainage ditch. That's where this story really starts. The problem is multiple people had multiple chances to call the police and just step up. I mean, 911 was called multiple times about this, and people wouldn't give their real names. They would only give a vague description of where he was, if he even was there anymore. Other people thought, oh, he called, so must be okay. We don't need to worry about that. It was just, there was so many different people pointing different fingers at everyone else and saying, yeah, he'll take care of it. He'll take care of it. He'll take care of it. At the same time, one of the killers is trying to leave the state and, move across the country. The other one is, slightly injured. His mom's trying to get him care for that, but nobody's given a straight story. And that's why Joey died. He didn't die initially from the fight. he was alive for 12 hours, maybe 16 hours in that drainage ditch before he didn't have the strength to turn over, and he drowned in 2 inches of water. And that's the gut punch for me. That's the point where you say, oh my God, this guy had a chance. These people knew, somebody knew he had a chance, and they let it happen. And
so how were the police, how were they involved in the capture of the Jasons? Like so what was the next step of this whole thing?
So I do know that the one, I believe it was Jason Solar's mom, she was finally the one that said, you know what, we got to go report this and tell them exactly where everything is. This is after hours and hours of, things going on. I don't know exactly the outcome as far as the arrests, but I do know that that's when they were finally led to that drainage ditch. There are reports that people had been back and seen him up in that drainage ditch, sitting up. Well, when they got back that last time, he was laying down, face down in the water. So, if they would have been there 3 hours earlier, there's a lot of ifs in this story.
Sure.
3 hours earlier, they would have saved his life. But it took so long for someone to actually have the guts to step up in a situation that he's not here. 26 years later, he's not here.
And that's what led to the legislation that we'll get to in a little bit. I will say this. So I have recently been privy to a study that was done. It was actually done in London, where they basically tested the responses of strangers to different types of acts of violence. And what happened with your cousin with Joey is something that is the norm, not the exception. Most people, when viewing a criminal act, especially a violent criminal act, generally do not act. They don't intervene, and they don't call for help. The psychology behind it is where you get into some differing opinions among professionals. Is it they assume that somebody else has already called, somebody else will call, or is it out of fear of the repercussions, or is it of the idea that they don't want, or retaliation is often the one, or the idea that they don't have the time. I don't have the time to be bogged down with police and all this other kind of things. So one of them specifically was a circumstance where there was very clearly a woman being sexually assaulted. And it was like 4 or 5 different people in the same space at the same time. Nobody called for help. Nobody called 911. Nobody intervened or anything like that. And when interviewed later, the common response was, I assumed it was going to be fine and somebody else would help her. So just and that's not okay. That's not okay. We should be doing better as a society. The problem is we've gotten so far away over generations and generations. We've gotten so far away from being a village, and especially in a city environment, we no longer have that village mentality, that idea that we're all in this together. We take care of our fellow man. We've distanced ourselves from that. And that's not just today. This was 1996 this occurred?
1994, 26 years ago.
So
Nothing's changed.
Nothing. Very little has changed. Cities, especially the modern cities, we don't have that same familial relationship with people the way we did 200 or 300 years ago. It's just simply not the case. So, all right. So the police are finally involved. They find him. He's passed away. One of the Jason's mother got involved. What were the initial charges? What did they get charged with initially?
Second-degree murder. Both of them were convicted of second-degree murder. Both of them were sentenced to 25 years in prison. So, you know what? At that point, case closed, end of the story. But it wasn't the end of the story.
No, it was not.
It just got worse from there. So one of the killers was able to get a new trial. He was able to plea down to a manslaughter charge and get out of prison. He also spent most of his time during the appeal out on $250,000 bail. So effectively, he spent maybe 6 years in prison total for killing someone. Wow. That may not even be the worst one. So on the other side, Jason Twyman, his conviction was never overturned based on any technicalities in the trial. But 10 years later, the state Supreme Court decided all felony murders that an assault was involved with weren't murder, because you just meant to beat them up and not kill them. I don't understand how that is. I still don't understand how that makes sense. You know, if you kill somebody, you kill somebody. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, if it's with a car or a fist or a gun or a knife, you know, and I know the laws are different, and I know, you know, that's what I have to deal with and process in my head. But he ended up getting out after 10 years. So between the two of them, they spent less than 20 years in prison. And they're both now, you know, members of society. I have no idea what they're doing now, and couldn't care less what they're doing now. But they are out there, and they get to live their life. Their parents got to see them grow up. Their parents got to see them either be successful or not. And something Joe and Melvin never got to do. They never got to see Joey grow up. Yep. And that's a shame.
It is. It's absolutely a tragedy. And one of the things, so, you know, you always want to say, if anything else, you know, if there's going to be a tragedy like this, and there's such a hugely, like, there's victimless crimes. This is not one. There is a victim here. At least let it be for a purpose. Now, I'm reading through the law that was applied to these cases. The idea being that, like you said, their intent was not to murder him, thus leaving him injured in a ditch, and that ultimately it was not indirect. It was indirectly their assault that led to his death, and that a murder conviction does not apply in this case. They were convicted on murder, but that it should not have been the case. Yada yada yada. Years later, now I will say, although we're going to talk about legislation that took place because of Joey's murder, but at least there is changes to the way that prosecutions are done across the country now, directly because of this. Now, in New York, I can only speak to New York because I'm not familiar with other states. But in New York, for example, if I was to go out and beat the shit out of somebody, and that person ultimately died, and it was a crime of passion that was not premeditated, but perhaps I had shown aggression toward this person previously, or in some manner of way, this was an ongoing feud, then ultimately, at least in New York State, in the area that I'm in, I would get charged most likely with 2 crimes. Well, 3 crimes. I would get charged with assault with deadly intent. I would get charged, which is a certain level of felony, and I forgot what the actual letters are. It's like a assault D or something like that. But I would get charged with that. I would also get charged with murder, second. Not murder first, because it wasn't premeditated. Murder second. But then they would also charge me with manslaughter. Because in the event that I go to court, and this is another thing that's changed in the last 10 or 15 years, in the event that I go to court and the murder conviction cannot stand, when the jury is brought into the deliberation room and they are asked, can you convict on murder, and they cannot come to a universal decision, then they can say, well, you have the option. What about manslaughter? And I believe that if the Jasons had the option, if the juries had the option of manslaughter, they would have more easily been convicted on that. Now, so their conviction several years later was overturned. They were given credit for time served, correct? For the time that they were already in jail.
And let's go back to that, what you just said about the conviction of manslaughter. If the laws were how they are written now, they would have been serving their 25 years in prison. Nothing would have changed. The laws absolutely have changed in the state of Washington as well, as how we handle that type of case. And it didn't. It changed very soon after Joey's case. So it's the same here in Washington as it is in New York. I believe you would be charged the same exact way, and it would. You know, I believe they would have been convicted again of second degree murder. I believe it would have also been upheld if it would have just happened. I mean, you know, a lot of ifs, a lot of things we can say. I wish it happened this way. I wish it happened. I mean, the bottom line is I wish Joey was here. I mean, that's all that really matters in this case. So yes, the laws are the same here now, which is great for families going forward. But it doesn't change what happened in the past. Yeah,
correct. So they're released from jail. Yes. Giving credit for time served and not necessarily an overturning of the conviction, but a rereading of the existing laws in the books and how it applies to their case. So then what happens is, if I understand, which is often what happens when a loved one, especially a child, is murdered, your aunt and uncle went to bat. What did they do next?
So they went to bat with their local politicians. They decided, you know what, something needs to be done about this. And I think in their mind, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think in their mind, the thing that hurt them the most was, I mean, obviously they wish someone would have said something, because if one person would have just said something. So that was their focus. Their focus was the Joey Levick bill, which did become the Joey Levick Law, the Joey Levick bill, Joey Levick Act, whatever you want to call it, in different states. But they went to bat to, make it a law to be a good Samaritan, to be that person that calls the police, calls 911. And if you have intimate knowledge of a crime being committed, such as this, you can be prosecuted for that crime being committed. And that was their focus. That was their focus for a very long time. A very watered down version of that law was finally passed in the state of Washington. It ended up being a monetary penalty, I believe, up to $1,000. Quite
So
different
fine,
a fine, and quite different than what they initially set out to accomplish.
What was the pushback from opponents to the law? Or the bill? What was their reasoning why it shouldn't happen?
You can't regulate morality. That was their pushback.
True. Yep.
And that's and while I understand that point of view, let's go back to what you just said about your study from, was it England, about, most people would just walk away. Well, it sounds like if we're doing studies that are peer reviewed, I would say, in this case, that say people will just walk away. I mean, I've heard cases of, attacks in India and other places where the victim, they just step over the victim and keep walking. Yep. And if that is people's gut reaction, then why can't we regulate morality? If all the studies say, and I'm going to pose this question to you, why can't we? If all the studies say people will walk away to keep themselves out of it, why can't we regulate it?
Well, I don't know if we can. I do know that there was a similar law. Actually, I'm not positive about this. I have the feeling there's a similar law in New York State that was actually passed and implemented and then repealed for the same reasoning, right? I don't know the whys, the ifs, the ands, and the hows. I will say this. One of my things that I often do is I apply animal genetics or evolution of other species to the human being, because ultimately we're really only about 60,000 years away from being in the trees ourselves. So if you watch herd creatures that are often the victims of lion, leopard, or any other kind of predatory cat attacks, for example, whether it's a gazelle or wildebeest or whatever the case may be, when the attack comes, the flock or the herd or whatever disperses. But they don't all get away. It's not like they just take off and they keep running until they're as far away from the kill as possible. They generally run until there is a kill. And you will watch wildebeest, elephants even, gazelles, and they will just kind of stand over there. And they don't interact. They don't try to break up the fight. Now you'll see it with a mother with a cub or with a fledgling. A mother will defend her child, but flock animals, herd animals don't intervene in the attack of a predatory animal. Now, we're not talking about the same thing here, but we also have a natural xenophobia, as I tried to bring up earlier on in our discussion about this idea that we're not part of a tribe anymore, we're not part of a village. For eons, human beings have existed in a village-esque tribal environment, generally no more than 21 people with close, intimate contact with each other. And it's only in the last couple of hundred years, since the Industrial Revolution, that we've been thrust into these large, packed-in cities with the modern lifestyle, with this kind of crime that happens so prevalently. It's also a uniquely American thing too. Not violent crime in itself, but this just unequaled slaughter that happens in the United States. It's a uniquely American thing. And so this detachment that we have, whether it's from cowboys and Indians or violent movies, video games, whatever, and I'm certainly not trying to say that that's the problem. I'm saying it's part of the overall psychology that takes place, that we all have this natural detachment, that we see something and say, it's not affecting me. I don't have space for this in my life. It's not my responsibility. And I think it goes to an evolutionary trait. You know, if we were being attacked by lions in the Serengeti 75,000 years ago, and a lion grabbed Bob, but that lion didn't grab me, I'm not trying to help Bob because that lion's going to kill me. I'm going to go run for this rock. And I think that's part of the genetics of it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I mean, we legislate morality all the time. Pedophilia, rape, murder in other ways, financial crimes, all these things, right? We legislate morality all the time. You got the right trying to legislate abortion until they're blue in the face. So I don't think it's a matter of being unable to legislate morality in this case. I think people that want to preserve what they consider freedom will use that language to make that argument. But I don't know if that's necessarily valid. I just really long-winded. I apologize. Really long-winded response.
No, you're not any more long-winded than I've been in this conversation today. And I get what you're saying, but there are also other pack animals that are known to fight back when one of their members is taken out. Lions, for example, do fight back. So it's not inherent in every species that if one goes down, the rest of us run away. There are species that do fight back. So why are we a herd animal, I guess you'd say, as opposed to why aren't we the lions? Why do we?
I think some of us
react the other way. Well,
I think some of us are. I think that we have a lot of different types of personalities, and there are alphas and there are betas.
You're right. You're right, and you're right, and I understand that, but I guess my point here is you had multiple people who knew multiple things about a dude dying in the he wasn't their family. No, they didn't care about him, but he's sitting there dying in a ditch, and every one of them, it's crazy to me. I'm sorry to reiterate something from earlier in the conversation, but it's still 26 years later. I don't get it.
Right. And I when I make the argument against or make the argument for what the opponents were saying, I am not trying to legitimize the fact that people did not get involved.
I know you're not.
I think it's utter nonsense. And I certainly would not, if I was there, if I was witness to it, I'm the guy, and I can tell you this unequivocally, and partially maybe because I was in the Marine Corps and I was trained that way. But if I saw two guys beating on a guy helpless in a ditch, I would be over there cracking skulls. But I'm not normal. I'm a little bit on one end of the spectrum. And I think for the majority of people, they're afraid of getting hurt themselves. They're afraid of the consequences of their actions. But if somebody knew that he was laying there like that and they didn't call for help, like if they're 5 miles away on their cell phone, although actually we're talking about 94, there probably weren't even cell phones.
Home phone.
Yeah, but if somebody didn't go somewhere and call for help, I mean, that's just preposterous to me. So now there were 4 people named by your aunt and uncle, specifically that were named as witnesses. Correct. That knew of the circumstances, that did not get involved. So nothing happened to those people. They weren't involved in the trials. No public apologies. Nothing like that. Other
than a few of them being questioned or being witnesses during the trial, nothing happened. I mean, I would hope, and I don't know because I'm not them, but I would sure hope that there's at least some regret in that regard. And I hope that just like it changed my life, that it changed their life. And, I don't wish anything but the worst for the 2 guys that killed Joey. I couldn't care less about them. But I hope that it shouldn't have happened. It was just completely preventable. But I hope his death is a positive thing for other people. And I think for me, it's made me think of life differently. And, it hurts every time I think about him, but to have a different perspective is important. And I did get that. I did get a different perspective on life. And, I cherish that every day. And I'm glad I get that different perspective. I just hate why it happened. I hate it.
Sure. Yeah. And I've been lucky in my life that I have known of no person close to me that has been the victim of this kind of a heinous crime. I'm going to cross my fingers here that the chat is working. It is not, so that's unfortunate. So we do have a comment from Angela, your wife. Actually, a couple of comments. First, she said, "Why do we have to have laws to protect good Samaritans from being sued by the people they are trying to help?" And then the second question is, why should we all be fiercely protective? We should all be fiercely protective of the life of another person who cannot help themselves. That second statement is absolutely accurate. The first question is a little bit tougher. So the laws to protect good Samaritans often come from the I actually was almost involved in one of these kind of circumstances. So if I was a first responder, which I was at one point in time for a brief period of my life, and I pull up on a car accident and I see somebody laying on the side of the road and they're not breathing, and I give them CPR and I break their ribs, 12 years ago they could have sued me. So some of the Good Samaritan law protections are in place for exactly that reason. And that should be, in this case as well, it should also go two ways. There should really be, ultimately, the fact that there is not legislation that says that it is your moral responsibility to at least report a crime you see. It's tough. I got to be honest that I see both sides of it. There is also another way of looking at these kind of circumstances, which I'm gonna bring it into this context in a humorous way, but I certainly don't mean any of this to be funny. But Louis C.K. had a before he lost any any real moral value in the United States because of the Me Too movement. But prior to that, he had a bit that he did that I actually, as a parent, found to be hilarious. He tells a story about when him and his wife, when they were dating, before they had children, before they got married, and they went into a store and they saw a woman just absolutely screaming at a child. And they felt compelled to get, and I'm going to add on to this a little bit to put it into context, but they felt compelled to interact or interject with the woman yelling at the child. And their questioning was, well, what could this poor child have done to make a woman that angry that woman had to scream at that child? And so from their perspective in that moment, the child was the victim. And then he talks about how years later they have two children. They've been married for years. They're walking into a Walmart and there's a father just screaming at his kid. And they go, that son of a bitchin' kid. What the hell did that kid do? He must have deserved it. He must have done something really shitty in that store. And it's a matter of perspective. Obviously, it's much funnier when he tells the story. But as children, having children of my own, there have been circumstances where I have had to, punish my children. I've had to berate them publicly for whatever reason. And somebody not privy to the moments before that have no idea why. Now, with all that said, if you're watching a man being beaten on the side of a road and having his body dumped, there's no real explanation for that. But for a bystander that sees that happen, the fear of the why, questioning does that person deserve it for some reason? Did I miss something? Did he do something to warrant? Are they actually defending themselves? And just enough question, along with their sense of their own fear for their responsibility or their part to play in reporting it or trying to interject. I mean, that's a strong cocktail of psychological response that could cause that, and it's not right. But I understand, I guess, why legislators were hesitant, as they explain it, to legislate morality.
And I get that, and I tend to see both sides of it as well, because I get that. I mean, I think we all should think the best of other people, and I think as I've gotten older, that view of the world has changed drastically. But I would hope that we could think the best of people, and that we don't have to legislate morality because people are going to do the right thing. I think it's blatantly obvious that people won't do the right thing, or can't do the right thing, or just aren't willing to do anything right. And as I get older, I get more and more jaded, and a little more towards that direction. When I was 20 and kind of a new adult to the world, and this was a much more fresh topic and thought in my mind. 6 years after, I probably would have sided with the whole, well, why do we have to legislate morality? I think that's, I would have thought at the time, maybe that's ridiculous. Now that I've gotten older and seen what this world in some ways is all about, I don't have a lot of problem with legislating it, because it's become clear to me that people can't or won't do it themselves. And
sure.
Simple as that. I mean, it's just simple as that.
And we have a number of proofs around society today.
Absolutely.
When we look at, especially when we look at federal and presidential politics.
I mean, we can get into that conversation, and you can go down the rabbit hole and the amount of people that won't do the right thing, and the number of situations they won't do the right thing. But we're talking about the absolute most egregious crime you can commit: murder. You killed someone. And I don't care if it, maybe we don't need to legislate morality when it comes to, oh, that guy, stole that guy's wallet and ran off. There's no, I mean, there's a victim in the crime, but there's no violence, in a situation like that. Maybe we don't have to run after them and stop them for fear of getting a ticket or going to jail. But this is murder, and this is, there's only two crimes where I could see it being absolutely important that you call. Someone's murdered, someone's raped. You have to do something. I don't disagree with you at all. And this was somebody's child. And you now, did you say before we started tonight that your aunt and uncle were going to watch tonight? Yeah, I don't know if they did. I hope they got a chance to see at least some of this. It's extremely important to me that they know that their son is still loved, still remembered, and is still an important part of my life. That's what this is about. This is about coming together 26 years later. I actually had a quote, and somebody attributed this at some point to Banksy, but I had a quote I found that actually seems appropriate, and it goes back a little farther than Banksy, but I do want to read it. I know we're getting close to the end here of this conversation, but so it's this: someday soon, perhaps in 40 years, there will be no one alive who has ever known me. That's when I will truly be dead, when I exist in no one's memory. I want it to be known 26 years after your death, Joey, you are still not forgotten. We all still love you. We all still mourn what happened to you. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this. This is why it's important.
Excellent. And Melva and Joe, if you are watching tonight, I am glad to take a part in this part of your story and to know what happened. And if anything, I know we do not have huge viewership here, but if anybody picked up this message and heard the story and it compelled them to change their opinion on any of this stuff, I feel like we've done our job. Yes. Heavy show tonight. We promise not to be this emotional next time.
If anybody wants to talk more about this, there's a lot more to this. We just scraped the surface of this conversation, and I am happy to chat at any time. He's important to me, and this conversation's important to me, and this topic's important to me. So by all means, reach out. I'm happy to talk. Awesome.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for watching tonight's episode of The Gentleman the Jerk. This is one of our few one-topic shows. I hope you enjoyed it. We actually would love to get into more of this type of format.
There's my aunt. She did.
Oh, there she is right there.
So she's been here. I appreciate you coming on. I hope I did his memory justice. That's what's important to me. That is why we are having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Melvin.
All right. Well, if you guys have, for those of you that are watching, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please do that. We are trying to build a YouTube channel here. We have moved away from Facebook only because Facebook limited our opportunity to broaden our audience. So if you could subscribe to the channel, share it with your social media feed, because we would love some new people to come in and watch. I do feel, after 3 months of doing this now, that the production quality is getting a little bit better. We're having less and less technical difficulties. Yeah, less glitches every time. We are still learning. I'm getting better with the software and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, this is what the show is going to look like going forward. I think this is the first time with no audio problems, so thumbs up for that. No,
twice. Now we've done 2 in a row. We're on a streak.
Fantastic. All right.
I do want to say, I hope everyone out there, I believe Chris and I have a voice. We have something to say, and I think we have something important to say. And I hope you subscribe, share this video. I mean, this was a tough topic for me. A couple times it got tougher, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you didn't cry though. I told Jessica, my girlfriend, that you cried when you ate the Wagyu beef when you were visiting here. So obviously your buffer for emotional response is a little bit different than most humans. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode of The Gentleman and the Jerk. I am Chris. That's Mark.
I am Mark.
We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.
Good night.